They were born in fire and nearly died in it. Two tiny German Shepherd pups, left behind in the smoldering wreckage of a wildfire, burned, whimpering, alone. No one came, until one man did. A former soldier turned small-town cop carrying his own scars, stumbled across their broken bodies and made a promise. They would never be left behind again. But 3 years later, surrounded by traitors and trapped in a snowstorm of bullets, he's the one who's left for dead. And now it's their turn to keep the promise. What happened next will break your heart, and then heal it again. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments, and if you believe in second chances, if you believe even a howling heart can still save a life, then hit that subscribe button, because this story will stay with you forever. Ironwood, Colorado was not known for tragedy. It was known for pines tall enough to scrape the belly of heaven, snow that kissed the mountains gently, and the kind of silence that made city people uncomfortable. But that fall, the silence was shattered by sirens. A wildfire had started 3 nights ago, born of dry lightning, carried by a rogue wind that funneled through Black Hollow Canyon. Firefighters called it the Screamer because it howled across the ridgelines like something alive. At the edge of the burn zone, where the scent of pine met scorched earth, Ethan Cole, 44, knelt in the blackened soil. His uniform was damp with sweat and smoke, his gray-streaked hair matted to his forehead. Though his badge read officer, he had once held a different title: Staff Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, Recon Division. Now, his wars were quieter, lonelier. Just him, his patrol routes, and the ghosts that never left. He wasn't supposed to be there, not officially. The fire crews had cordoned off the area, but Ethan had volunteered to help evacuate an old couple's cabin before the flames got too close. He'd gotten them out in time, and now he wandered the smoking ruins out of habit, out of something deeper. Maybe guilt. He didn't expect to hear the sound. A high-pitched whimper. Weak. Raw. It came from a collapsed tool shed, barely holding together, its roof charred and slanted like a broken wing. Ethan paused. Then he heard it again. He moved quickly, kicking aside a burnt plank, coughing as ash puffed up around him. Inside the shed, wedged behind a warped wheelbarrow and a pile of half-melted cans, was a wooden crate blackened at the edges, one corner still smoldering, and inside, 2 German Shepherd puppies. They were curled into each other, barely breathing. One was mottled black and gray, its fur singed at the sides, and its back leg twisted, unnaturally burned deep. The other was a soft, almost golden brown, its eyes wide with fear but clearer, protective. Its paw lay across the injured one as if shielding it from the world. Ethan fell to his knees. "Jesus," he whispered. "Who would—" He didn't finish. He just reached in, carefully scooping them both out, feeling their fragile ribs beneath thin skin. The injured pup whimpered, and the other one growled faintly, a broken sound but brave. "You're fighters," he muttered. Behind him, Captain Samantha Reed called out. She was the local fire captain, late 30s, tall, lean, with wind-chapped cheeks, and a voice always 1 decibel louder than needed. Samantha had been fighting fires since she was 20, and it showed. Her hands were calloused, her gaze steady. "You weren't supposed to go near the West Ridge," she called, jogging toward him in her yellow turnout gear, soot smearing her jaw. "Found something," Ethan said, holding up the pups. Samantha's sharp tone softened. "You've got to be kidding me." Crate was nearly ashes. These 2 barely made it. She knelt beside him. "Who'd leave them here?" "Doesn't matter now," Ethan said, eyes on the smaller one. "They're alive. That's what matters." A silence fell between them, not awkward, but heavy. Samantha knew Ethan's history, knew about the fire that took his wife, Ellie, and their unborn daughter 5 years ago. He never talked about it. He just worked, and walked alone. "You keeping them?" she asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at the pups, at the weaker one with the burned leg, now trembling in his palm. "The little guy," Ethan murmured, voice thick. "He looks like ash." Samantha raised an eyebrow. "Then the other's the fire that didn't kill him," she said. "Name him Blaze." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Blaze and ash," he repeated. "Yeah, that fits." She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, then rose and walked back toward the fire truck. Ethan stayed there a moment longer, clutching life in his arms, his knees blackened by soot. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He stayed on the floor of his cabin, an old log structure just outside Ironwood, beside the two pups. Ash had to be taken to the vet the next morning. His leg likely needed surgery. Blaze refused to sleep unless curled around his brother. Ethan watched them through the night, listening to their shallow breaths, the ticking of the fireplace. He whispered to the silence, "I couldn't save Ellie, but maybe, just maybe, I can save you." Outside, the wind carried ash and pine through the cold mountain air. But inside the cabin, something began to warm. Not just the pups, but Ethan's heart too. 3 winters had passed since that night of ash and fire. In Ironwood, the seasons shifted gently. Spring brought the smell of damp pine and melting snow. Summer arrived with late sunsets and campfire smoke, and autumn painted the trees in orange and red. But it was the winters that etched themselves into the bones. Long, cold, honest, much like Ethan Cole. At 47, Ethan had changed, but only slightly. The sharp lines on his face had deepened, the gray in his hair spread wider. He still patrolled the back roads of Ironwood alone, but now he was never really alone. 2 German shepherds rode with him in the truck. Blaze, the bold one, large and proud with sleek black and brown fur that gleamed under any light, and Ash, leaner, quieter, with eyes the color of wet stone and a faint scar along his back leg where the fire had once kissed too hard. They weren't just dogs. They were certified K9s now trained to track, protect, and apprehend. Blaze was strength and instinct. Ash was precision and thought. Together, they completed Ethan. More than once, the townsfolk had said the trio looked like a single unit, one heartbeat shared by 3 bodies. On a Monday morning, blanketed in thin frost, Ethan sat in the precinct briefing room, sipping black coffee. The room was plain. Just 4 desks, a coffee maker that hissed more than it brewed, and a corkboard filled with pinned maps and sticky notes. A whiteboard bore Ethan's careful handwriting. Watch for break-ins near Forest Loop Trail. At his feet, Blaze sat upright, alert but calm. Ash, meanwhile, lay sprawled near the heater, his ears still perked for any odd sounds. They had their own vests, black nylon with reflective trim. The badges stitched into them read K9 Unit/Ironwood PD. "Morning, Sheriff." The voice came from Deputy Carl Winslow, mid-30s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a trimmed red beard and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. He respected Ethan, called him Sheriff, even though Ethan was technically just a senior patrol officer. Carl was reliable, if a bit slow to adapt. Ethan gave a quiet nod. "Anything on the Forest Loop?" "Nothing yet. But I talked to old Mrs. Finch again. She swears she heard footsteps outside her barn." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "She also thinks deer are stealing her tomatoes." Carl grinned and sipped his cocoa instead of coffee. "True. Still, worth checking." Ethan turned to Blaze and Ash. "We'll head out there after lunch." As Carl left, Samantha Reed walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual fire captain uniform, just jeans, a faded green jacket, and her dark auburn hair tied back. The left sleeve of her jacket was patched where a spark once melted through it. At 39, Samantha looked younger than she felt. The past few years had carved out new resilience in her, not just because of the firestorms, but because of things unspoken between her and Ethan. She carried a small metal box in her hand. "What's that?" Ethan asked. She opened the lid slightly. Inside, 2 homemade peanut butter dog biscuits shaped like bones. "Bribes," she said, smirking. "For the boys." Ash trotted over first, gently sniffing the air, then gave a short, approving bark. Blaze waited, watching Ethan's reaction before approaching. "You spoil them," Ethan muttered. Samantha shrugged. "They earned it. I heard about last week's mountain rescue. Ash had located a missing hiker in less than an hour. Blaze had led the medics through a rockslide path when their GPS failed. The whole thing made local news, but Ethan had turned down the interview. He didn't care for praise, just results." Samantha stayed for coffee, leaning against the file cabinet while Ethan stood by the window, gazing at the slow swirl of snowflakes beginning to fall. "You still writing in that notebook?" she asked after a while. Ethan hesitated, then nodded toward a drawer in his desk. Inside was a worn leather notebook. Its pages weren't full of reports, but sketches. Of Ash asleep under the stove, of Blaze leaping mid-air to catch a frisbee, of his late wife Ellie drawn from memory, and of flames, always flames, curling across the edges of his mind. "You ever gonna show anyone that?" she asked, her voice softer. "Maybe," he said, almost inaudibly. "One day." There was a quiet understanding between them. She didn't press. He didn't retreat. That afternoon they took the truck out to Forest Loop. The snow had thickened, but the plow had cleared enough of the main trail. Blaze and Ash bounded through the powder like wolves reborn. Ethan followed on foot, hand resting on the tranquilizer holster at his hip, just in case. No signs of forced entry, no tracks beyond deer and rabbit. Still, Ash paused at the side of an old cedar tree, sniffed once, and barked, sharp and sure. Ethan followed the cue and spotted a cigarette butt, still fresh, tucked behind a rock. Whoever was sneaking around wasn't local. Most Ironwood folks knew not to smoke in forest areas, especially after fire season. He took a photo and bagged the evidence. Beside him, Blaze growled low. Ash circled twice, ears flat. Ethan straightened, alert now. "Let's go, boys." Eyes open. They didn't find the intruder that day, but the signal was clear. Trouble was inching back toward Ironwood. That night, back at the cabin, Ethan sat on the porch with a blanket over his shoulders, a thermos of coffee beside him. Blaze lay by the step, eyes scanning the trees. Ash curled close, his head resting on Ethan's boot. Samantha had called an hour ago just to say goodnight, just to check in. Ethan didn't say much in return, but his heart felt less heavy. Above them, stars blinked through cloud gaps. The fire inside the cabin still flickered, but this time, Ethan didn't flinch at the sight of it. He watched the dogs blaze, strong and steady like fire contained. Ash, gentle and quiet, always searching. His silent companions. Together they made the cold feel warmer. The snow in Ironwood had grown thicker overnight, turning every rooftop into a pale canvas and every pine branch into a delicate sculpture. The town looked like a postcard, peaceful, silent, undisturbed. But peace is deceptive. Beneath the surface, something had begun to rot. Ethan Cole adjusted the collar of his jacket as he stepped into the Ironwood Police Department at 7:03 a.m. sharp. Blaze and Ash padded closely at his sides, their paw steps nearly soundless on the vinyl floor. They never strayed far. Lately, Ethan had been grateful for that more than usual. The station buzzed in a way that felt off, not busy, not loud, just wrong. Officers moved quickly, but their eyes darted. Conversations were clipped, unfinished. The kind of behavior that said people were either hiding something or terrified. That was when Captain Harold Price reappeared. Price was in his late 50s, square-jawed with thinning white blonde hair and the permanent tan of a man who golfed more than he policed. He had transferred in from Denver 2 months ago after a disagreement with the previous department. Though no one ever said what the disagreement was, Ethan didn't trust him, not because of the rumors, but because Price smiled too easily, and never with his eyes. "Morning, Cole," Price greeted, sipping from his steel thermos. "You and the wolves ready for another quiet day?" "They're not wolves," Ethan replied, voice flat. Price chuckled. "Could have fooled me." Blaze stared at the captain, unblinking. Ash stood slightly behind Ethan, eyes flicking toward the records office. After Price left, Ethan knelt beside Ash and whispered, "What is it, boy?" Ash sniffed again, then moved slowly toward the file room. Ethan followed. The room was locked, but that had never stopped Ash. He placed a paw gently on the door, then looked back, tail stiff. Ethan noted the behavior. It wasn't agitation. It was focus. They waited until lunch hour when most of the staff had cleared out. Ethan returned alone, used his old master key, still valid after years in the department, and slipped inside. The air smelled faintly of ink, paper, and something else. Grease? Oil? Ash followed, nose pressed low to the floor. Near the back cabinet he stopped, barked once, a sharp, accusatory sound. Ethan opened the cabinet. It was supposed to hold routine incident reports. Instead, tucked behind a stack of traffic citations, he found a thin manila folder labeled with nothing but a red sticker, R17. He flipped it open. Inside were photographs, crates, weapons, symbols etched in black marker, and receipts, cargo manifests, truck rentals, all paid in cash. Dates matched with the past 3 weeks, the same period Ironwood had seen an unusual spike in storage unit break-ins. One document caught Ethan's eye, a delivery scheduled for that Friday night, the pickup location, an abandoned lumber mill on Route 12, no names, no contact info. Ethan took a photo of the file with his burner phone and placed everything back exactly as he'd found it. Outside, Blaze waited beside the hallway, tail wagging lazily, but his eyes locked onto Ethan's face like he could read it. That night, Ethan didn't sleep at home. He stayed in the cabin's office, surrounded by papers, a pot of coffee gone cold, and a small black recording device no larger than a thumb drive. He had purchased it quietly in Denver 2 weeks ago, long before Price came to Ironwood. Something about recent departmental shifts had set off alarms in Ethan's gut, the way calls were rerouted, the way evidence reports vanished and came back with new signatures. So he started recording. The device was now tucked inside the molding of his desk drawer. It activated on sound and uploaded directly to a cloud account under a pseudonym, Silas Boone. Only Ethan and Ash knew. In the morning, Ethan entered the break room to refill his mug. Officer Janie Morales was already there, mid-20s, short, Latina, with thick black curls tucked under her beanie. She was new to the force, green but observant, and her loyalty was untested. "You look like hell," she said, handing him the sugar without asking. "Been worse," Ethan replied. "Can I ask something?" she continued, stirring her tea. "Why do you never leave those 2 dogs at home?" Ethan looked down. Blaze was sitting by the coffee machine. Ash was lying by the trash bin, his head on his paws. "They've been through more than most people I know," Ethan said. "They earned the right to watch my back." Janie paused, then nodded. "Well, for what it's worth, I think they're the only ones in this place who really listen." Her words stuck with him longer than expected. That evening, Ethan did a solo drive along Route 12. No lights, just moon and memory. The abandoned lumber mill sat like a dead animal carcass, half collapsed, full of rusted saws and old rot. But as he pulled up with his headlights off, he saw it. Fresh tire tracks in the snow, heavy tread, more than one vehicle. He didn't get out, not yet. Instead, he pulled away slowly and drove to a ridge that overlooked the mill from above. He used his binoculars and watched. At 2:18 a.m., a black van pulled in. Then another. Men got out. Dark jackets, masked faces. They opened the back of one van. Inside were long wooden crates. Ethan clenched his jaw. Weapons, just like the folder said. Blaze growled low. Ash pressed his head into Ethan's knee. "We're in this deep now, boys," Ethan whispered. "Let's get some proof." He recorded everything with his phone's long lens attachment time-stamped. Clear. When one of the masked men turned and briefly removed his hood, Ethan's stomach dropped. It was Officer Dale Kincaid, late 30s, pale, wiry, with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and eyes that darted like they owed people money. Ethan had always found Kincaid twitchy, but never thought him dirty. Until now. Ethan lowered the phone. Blaze licked his hand once, as if to say, "You know what comes next." Frostbite Pass had earned its name honestly. The winding stretch of road carved between jagged cliffs and pine-covered slopes was beautiful in the summer. But in winter, it turned treacherous. Snow drifted high on either side, wind howled through the canyon, and visibility dropped to nearly nothing after dark. It was the kind of place most locals avoided at all costs, but Ethan Cole didn't have that luxury tonight. The witness beside him in the passenger seat was a man named Roy Beckett, mid-50s, balding, broad-shouldered, with nervous energy radiating from every twitch. He wore an oversized Army surplus parka, clearly not his own, and clutched a worn baseball cap in his gloved hands like it was a life preserver. Roy wasn't from Ironwood. He was a long-haul trucker from Billings, Montana, who'd overheard 2 men at a truck stop talking about moving crates from Ironwood to Nevada. He didn't think much of it until he saw one of those men again wearing an Ironwood PD jacket on local news. That's when he drove back and turned himself in, offering information in exchange for protection. Ethan wasn't fond of deals, but he also knew truth didn't always come clean. He agreed to escort Roy to a secure holding cabin operated by the state, halfway up Frostbite Pass. Just until morning. The snow had started again, heavier now, a dense flurry that erased the road's edges and made even the pine trees look like shadows of themselves. Blaze rode in the back seat, tense but alert, his black and brown fur twitching with every shift of the truck's tires. Ash lay low near Ethan's boots, his nose twitching constantly, ears pinned forward. The dogs had been uneasy since leaving the station. Ethan had noticed. "Something's off," he muttered to himself, eyes narrowing at the windshield. "They're too quiet." Roy glanced sideways. "You think someone's following us?" Ethan didn't answer. He slowed the vehicle slightly, headlights cutting through white curtain. They never saw the mine. It wasn't a big one. Just enough plastic explosives buried under ice, triggered by a remote. It went off with a muted boom beneath the front left tire, lifting the entire vehicle off the road and sending it sideways, over the edge, tumbling down the embankment in a blur of snow, steel, and glass. The world flipped, shattered, screamed. When it stopped, the truck was upside down, half buried in snow at the bottom of a shallow ravine. Silence came next, the kind that felt unnatural. Then Blaze growled. He was pinned awkwardly between the rear seat and the crumpled roof, blood trickling from a deep gash on his shoulder. But his eyes locked onto Ethan, who lay unconscious in the front seat, upside down, leg twisted painfully under the dashboard. Ash was already moving, crawling free through a broken window, limping slightly but driven by instinct. He stopped once outside, shook off the snow, then bolted. He didn't look back. He ran. 10 kilometers. Through storm. Through black. He ran for help. Back in the wreck, Blaze clawed his way toward Ethan. He could smell blood, hear the ragged wheeze of Ethan's breath. The seatbelt held Ethan upside down, but his arm hung limp, head lolling. Blaze lunged, using his teeth to bite at the belt again and again until it snapped. Ethan's body fell awkwardly, but it let Blaze crawl beside him. He whined low, nudging Ethan's chest. No response. Blood seeped through Ethan's pants legs, staining the snow beneath them. Meanwhile, at Ironwood PD, Ash burst through the main door, panting and frosted over, his amber eyes wide. Officers shouted in surprise, but Samantha Reed, who happened to be inside following up on a burn permit report, knew something was wrong the moment she saw him. "Ash," she said, crouching. He barked once, then turned, bolted to the door, looked back. "Something happened," she muttered, standing. "He shouldn't be alone." Captain Price stood nearby, flipping through a clipboard. "That's Ethan's dog, right? Probably just got loose. Get someone to secure him." But Samantha didn't wait. She grabbed her coat and keys. "He doesn't run." "Not unless Ethan tells him to. And Ethan would never send him back without Blaze." "You don't have clearance to," Price started. "I don't care," she snapped. "You want to file a complaint? You know where to find me." She radioed Deputy Carl and Officer Janie Morales, both of whom responded immediately. Within 15 minutes, 3 snowplows and 2 police trucks were on the road to Frostbite Pass, with Ash riding in the lead vehicle, his nose to the wind. Back in the ravine, Ethan stirred. His vision swam. Pain exploded in his leg and ribs, but he was alive. "Blaze," he croaked. The dog whined and pressed close, his body heat the only thing keeping Ethan from slipping deeper into hypothermia. "I need you," Ethan whispered, clutching Blaze's fur. "Just hold on." Then headlights, voices, shouts, Samantha's voice. "We've got movement!" Ash raced down the slope before anyone could stop him, his bark sharp and insistent. Rescuers descended the ravine in seconds, carving a path through the snow with shovels and ropes. Samantha reached Ethan first. She dropped to her knees beside him, not even pretending to stay professional. "You're bleeding," she said, touching his forehead. "You should see the truck," he rasped, half smiling. Blaze was lifted out first, loaded onto a stretcher by 2 medics. He didn't fight them, but his eyes never left Ethan. Ash climbed in after, tail thumping once against Ethan's arm before the medics moved him aside. "You disobeyed orders," Ethan muttered to Samantha as they lifted him onto a stretcher. "So did your dog," she said. "Guess I'm in good company." The ravine was silent again. The rescue team had been forced to retreat to the tree line once fresh snow began falling in dense, wet clumps. Their equipment couldn't dig fast enough, and the unstable slope above threatened to collapse under the weight of every step. But not all had left. Not Blaze. The big German shepherd, blood staining the fur along his side and front paw twisted at an unnatural angle, refused to leave Ethan Cole's side. His amber eyes scanned the tree line, flicking back to his handler every few seconds. Ethan was half conscious, his body tucked awkwardly beneath a jagged outcrop of granite that jutted from the mountainside like a broken tooth. Blaze had dragged him there an hour ago, using what little strength remained to pull Ethan by his collar, inch by inch, away from the burning wreckage and collapsing snow. Ethan's leg was fractured, badly twisted beneath him, a jagged edge of bone pressing against torn fabric. Blood loss was becoming a problem. So was the cold. But the real threat wasn't nature. It was them. The sound of human voices carried on the wind, deep, sharp, and angry. A flicker of flame appeared between the trees as a group of men lit a campfire in the distance. They were still searching. They hadn't expected survivors. Blaze shifted his weight forward, placing his body across Ethan's chest like a living shield. Snow gathered on his back. He didn't move. His ears were down. His breathing labored. And still, he didn't move. Ethan opened his eyes. Blaze. The dog looked down, whining softly. "If I don't make it," Ethan whispered, his voice raspy and slow, "you protect Ash. He still has work to do." Blaze licked the side of Ethan's face once, then turned his gaze outward again. He would not accept that command. 2 miles away and climbing uphill through blizzard-choked pine, Samantha Reed pressed forward with jaw clenched. Her fire coat was soaked through. Her boots sank in up to the knees every few steps. But she refused to stop. Behind her, a small squad of volunteers and 2 officers trudged on, including rescue tech Devin Moore, a quiet man in his 40s with a stocky build and a prosthetic hand from a wildfire burn years ago. Devin rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened. He had worked under Samantha for a decade, and tonight he followed her not out of duty, but loyalty. They were losing time. Samantha's fingers were going numb. Then Ash stopped. He'd been leading since they left the trucks behind, nose to the wind, eyes laser-focused. Now he froze. His head snapped right. He barked twice, sharply. "What is it, boy?" Samantha asked, stepping beside him. Ash suddenly bolted left off the main path, disappearing into thick snowbanks. Samantha followed without hesitation. Seconds later she heard it, a faint voice. "Help!" It was Eli Jarvis, a young paramedic from Willow Creek, just 23, wiry and sunburned from summers he spent on wildland fire crews. He had slipped earlier and disappeared. The others assumed he had gone back, but Ash had picked up his scent. And now, half buried under a sheet of fallen snow, they found him, blue-lipped and barely breathing. Ash crawled into the hole first, dug furiously, and bit gently onto Eli's jacket hood, tugging him free. Samantha dropped to her knees beside the boy. "We've got him! Get the med bag!" Devin arrived moments later, wrapping Eli in thermal blankets. The others gathered quickly, stunned. "He wouldn't have lasted another 20 minutes, Devin said. Samantha looked at Ash, breathless. "You saved him." But Ash was already moving again, toward Ethan. Back in the ravine, the firelight was growing closer. The men, 3 of them, moved slowly, guns in hand, scanning the snowy landscape for signs of movement. One of them wore a tactical vest with no insignia. Another carried a scoped rifle with a mounted flashlight. The third, smaller and twitchier, held a suppressed pistol and kept glancing over his shoulder. "I told you we should have finished them when we had the chance," the twitchy one muttered. "We'll finish them now," the leader growled. "No witnesses." Blaze didn't wait for them to find the hiding spot. He rose painfully and stepped out from behind the rock. His posture was tall, regal even, despite the blood and the limp. He growled, loud. The men froze. "What the hell?" the one with the pistol started. Then Blaze barked. Not once, but twice. It was a signal. From the slope above, Ash appeared. He launched from a snowbank, hitting the twitchy one square in the chest. The man fell back, weapon flying. Blaze, injured but fueled by raw instinct and devotion, lunged toward the leader. He didn't reach him, but it was enough to knock him sideways, disrupting his aim. Gunfire exploded. Echoes bounced off the cliffs. Samantha and Devin heard it from above. "Go!" she screamed, drawing her flare gun. She fired into the sky. A red arc lit up the forest like a burning comet. More barks, more screams. The men scattered, but only 2 made it far. Ash pursued one into the trees. Blaze pinned another against a stump, teeth bared inches from his throat. The fight ended in under 30 seconds. Samantha reached Ethan first. She skidded down the slope and dropped beside him, heart hammering. He was pale, his lips nearly blue. "Stay with me," she whispered, brushing snow from his face. His eyes opened. "Did Blaze get them?" She smiled through her tears. "He got enough." Behind her, Ash returned, fur dusted in snow, eyes gleaming. And Blaze? He collapsed beside Ethan, his breathing rapid but steady, alive, still watching over his pack. The wind shifted violently through the trees that night, howling through the bones of Ironwood's northern ridge like a warning from the mountain itself. Snow flurries danced in the cold, but the sky above was clear, too clear. a perfect stage for something terrible. The old ranger's cabin stood alone in the woods, weather-beaten and long forgotten. Its shingles curled, the porch sagged, and every wooden beam creaked like a dying breath. It was never meant to be a sanctuary, but in the aftermath of the ambush at Frostbite Pass, it was the only place the rescue team could temporarily move Ethan while waiting for airlift support. The radio tower had frozen over. The emergency medevac delayed. They were stranded. Inside the cabin, Ethan lay on a cot in the back room. His leg had been stabilized with a splint made from snowshoes and bandages. His ribs were wrapped tightly. His color had returned slightly, but the pain was still evident in the creases around his eyes. Samantha crouched by the stove, coaxing a fire to life. She had shed her outer layers, revealing a thermal shirt streaked with ash and blood. Her auburn hair, normally pulled tight, now hung damp around her jaw. She had aged in the past 24 hours, not in years, but in weight. Ash sat near the door, unmoving. Ever since Blaze had been separated from them during the chaotic retreat from the ravine, he hadn't made a sound. His ears twitched with every gust outside, waiting. Samantha glanced up. Still nothing? Ash didn't look at her, but the silence was answer enough. Ethan stirred. "He'll come," he murmured. Before Samantha could reply, the silence broke. A low hum, then the crack of footsteps. Not Paw's boots. Ash leapt to the window. His ears shot forward. A growl rumbled from his chest. Samantha dropped the kettle. "They found us." 3 figures emerged from the tree line. One carried a jerry can. The fire started fast. They poured accelerant on the outer walls and ignited it with a flare. Within seconds, flames climbed the cabin's logs like starving fingers. Inside, smoke filled the main room. Samantha grabbed Ethan's arm. "We need to move. Now." But Ethan's body wouldn't cooperate. Pain shot through his leg as he tried to stand. He collapsed with a grunt. Ash barked wildly at the back window, but it was already blocked by flame. "Get him out," Ethan said through clenched teeth. Samantha shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." "Please," he rasped. But she couldn't do it. Instead, she pulled him toward the kitchen door, only to find it sealed by heat. The walls groaned. And then another sound. A snarl. A crash. Blaze. He tore through the front entrance like a storm shoulder singed, muzzle blackened, eyes wild. His chest heaved with every breath, but he was moving, alive, burning. He locked eyes with Ethan. "Blaze, no!" Samantha shouted. But Blaze was already beside Ethan, teeth sinking into the back of his jacket, dragging. Smoke stung their eyes. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Samantha kicked open a side shelf in the pantry, revealing a crawl space used decades ago by rangers for storage. She pried it open. Blaze heaved Ethan's upper body toward her. Together, they pulled him through the narrow tunnel. Ash followed last, snapping at flame that crept too close to Ethan's boots. Just as Samantha reached for Blaze to pull him in, the roof collapsed. A flaming beam crashed across the crawlspace entrance, separating them. The force shoved Blaze backward. "No!" Samantha screamed, choking. Ash barked, clawing at the collapsed timber. Inside, Blaze stared through the smoke at the narrow gap at Ethan, unconscious, safe, and at Ash. For one breathless second, their eyes locked. Then Blaze stepped forward, into the fire. Samantha screamed again. But it was drowned by the sound of a howl raw, defiant, from the heart of the inferno. Ash froze. And then the cabin exploded. A wave of heat swept through the snow. Fire roared upward, consuming the structure. Ash was thrown back. Samantha shielded Ethan's body with her own. The next thing she remembered was coughing. And then movement in the smoke. Ash stood again, staggering, ears flattened. He moved forward slowly, muzzle low to the ground, scanning. And there, dragging a body behind him, Blaze emerged from the fire. His fur was blackened, chunks of it missing. His back leg barely moved. His chest was scorched, and his breathing was ragged. But in his jaws, he held the collar of Ethan's jacket. He had gone back in, not for Ethan, but for Ethan's badge. Ash rushed to his side. Blaze dropped the collar gently. He looked up at Ash. Then, slowly, deliberately, he laid his head down on the snow and did not move again. Rain fell softly over Ironwood, not in torrents but in gentle, persistent waves. The snow was finally melting, leaving behind damp soil, broken pine needles, and scars that didn't heal with spring. The townspeople said it was the longest winter they'd had in decades. Ethan Cole knew it wasn't the cold that made it long, it was everything that came with it. It had been 2 weeks since the fire. Ethan stood in his yard on crutches, one leg still wrapped and braced, his ribs tightly bound. His face had thinned, the lines around his eyes deeper now, but his gaze was steady. Before him stood a new addition to the property, a statue, carved from smooth black stone, slightly taller than life-size. It was Blaze. The sculpture captured him mid-step, head turned to the side, eyes alert. Even the scar on his shoulder had been etched into the marble. At the base, a brass plaque read, "He walked into the fire so we could walk away." Ash lay beside the statue, as he had each morning since it was placed. His ears no longer perked as high, his tail barely wagged. He ate only when Ethan asked. Grief settled into his bones like a second winter. Samantha Reed watched from the porch, arms crossed over a wool shawl. Her auburn hair was loosely braided, her face bare of makeup. The burn on her hand sustained while pulling Ethan from the crawlspace was healing, but she refused to wear a bandage. Said it helped her remember. She now lived here. It had started as a practical choice. Ethan couldn't walk well, and she didn't trust any nurse to monitor a man as stubborn as him. But as the days passed, it became something more. She cooked in the mornings, sat by the window in the evenings, and brought coffee to Ethan without ever asking if he wanted it. And Ethan, in turn, began speaking again. Not just commands to Ash, not just updates for the sheriff's office, but words that mattered. About Ellie, about the fire 5 years ago, about guilt, and eventually, about Blaze. That morning, Samantha stepped down from the porch. "You've been out here an hour." "It's starting to soak through your bandage." Ethan didn't move. "I need to tell him something." She paused. "You can tell me too." "I know," he said softly, "but it's not the same." He limped forward, leaned his hand against the stone neck of the sculpture, and whispered, "We found him, Blaze. The man who betrayed us." The truth unraveled in quiet, brutal threads. After the fire, Samantha had retrieved the camera collar Ash wore. It had been custom-fitted with a recording chip, one Ethan had installed months before as part of a backup surveillance measure for dangerous operations. The footage captured everything: the ambush, the weapons transfer, the firefight, even the rogue officers, and one voice. Clear, commanding, familiar. It belonged to Deputy Chief Randall Harrow. Harrow had been with the department for over 20 years. Tall, clean-cut, always impeccably dressed, with a silver pen clipped to his chest pocket that he polished after every arrest. His public persona was calm and articulate. Privately, he was feared unapproachable, sharp-eyed, and known for tearing down junior officers with surgical precision. Ethan had once looked up to him. Samantha had always distrusted him. The recording showed Harrow directing the ambush from a remote cabin, communicating via encrypted radio. He wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating the entire operation. Ash's camera had captured his voice, giving the order to clean up the witness and the mutt handler. That was all it took. The FBI swooped in within 48 hours. Harrow was arrested during a morning press conference. The image of him being handcuffed, still holding his polished silver pen, ran in every state newspaper. A web of conspiracy followed: weapons trafficking, laundering through construction contracts, and payoffs to silence rogue operatives. Ash had given them everything. For that, the governor himself presented the German Shepherd with the Medal of Valor in a private ceremony held beneath the county courthouse steps. The media wanted pictures. Flashbulbs popped, children clapped, but Ash didn't wag his tail. He simply sat, unmoving, eyes fixed on the statue of Blaze that had been placed at the ceremony's edge for the occasion. Ethan knelt beside him, dressed in formal blues, metal gleaming on his own chest, but his hand never left Ash's head. After the event, Ethan returned to the base of Blaze's statue at home. He placed a second medal, Ash's, beside the plaque. "We both know who this belongs to," he murmured. That night, it rained harder. Samantha found Ethan asleep in the chair beside the window, one hand resting on Ash's back. Outside, the silhouette of Blaze's statue glistened under the storm, streaked with silver trails of rain. The hills around Ironwood had turned green again. Wildflowers bloomed where snow once lay heavy, and soft morning fog drifted through the valleys like breath. A wooden sign swayed gently at the end of a gravel path just off County Road 6. Its lettering was carved deep and bold, as if meant to withstand decades of weather. Ash and Blaze Recovery and K9 Rescue Center. They were born to be saved, and lived to save others. The property beyond was modest, just a long L-shaped building with red cedar walls and black shingles, a fenced field to the east, a training course to the west, and a tall flagpole where the American flag flapped above a smaller one with a paw print embroidered in silver. The place had been Ethan's idea. Or maybe it had always been Blaze's, waiting in his heart to be named. Inside the main building, the scent of warm pine and fresh hay mixed with antiseptic. Several young German Shepherds rescues from across the state were going through obedience drills in a training ring. At their side walked Ash, now 8 years old. His movements were slower, his muzzle a little whiter around the edges, but his presence still commanded quiet respect. When he sat, they sat. When he turned his head, they mirrored him. He had become their compass. Watching from just outside the ring was Ethan, leaning on a walking cane but standing tall. His beard was thicker now, shot through with gray, and he wore a dark flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans. A leather belt held the badge he no longer carried for work, but still wore like an oath. Beside him stood a boy. Lucas Bryant, age 7, had dark curls that stuck out wildly beneath his hood. His cheeks were flushed with cold, and his small hands clutched a worn stuffed bear with one missing eye. He had big brown eyes, curious and bright, with a small scar near his left ear barely visible, a remnant of the night Blaze saved his family. His father, Marshall Bryant, was a widower, mid-30s, with soft-spoken mannerisms and the worn patience of a man who'd endured grief without losing kindness. Tall and slender, Marshall worked as a mechanic in Durango. After that terrible winter, he kept to himself until Lucas started asking about the dog from his dreams. That's how they found Ethan, and that's how they came to visit the rescue center that morning. Lucas hadn't said much since arriving, but when he saw Ash, really saw him, his tiny feet stopped. He stared for a long moment, then whispered, "Is that him?" Ethan knelt slowly beside the boy. "No, that's Ash. But Blaze, he was Ash's brother. And yours too," in a way. Lucas looked up. "Where's Blaze now?" Ash heard his name. His ears twitched. He walked slowly to Lucas, lowered his head gently, and pressed it against the boy's chest. Lucas dropped his bear, threw his arms around Ash's neck, and held on tightly. No words, just stillness. Then Ash turned. He walked out the side door of the training center, down a short garden path framed by tall grass and wild asters, to the quiet corner beneath a lone sugar pine tree. At the base of the tree was a smooth stone marker, simple, unadorned, except for the carved outline of a German Shepherd mid-run. No dates, just a name. Blaze. Ash stopped, looked back once. Lucas, small and solemn, padded through the wet grass behind him. He bent down, picked up a tiny white pebble, and placed it on the grave. "Thank you," he whispered. Ash gave a soft, low bark, a sound, not of grief, but of remembrance. From the porch, Samantha watched them with a hand over her heart. She wore overalls and rubber boots now, her auburn braid tucked into a straw cap. She had left firefighting 6 months ago, now working full-time at the center managing intake cases and coordinating therapy dog certifications for retired K9s. She turned to Ethan. "You think he remembers?" Ethan nodded. "Ash doesn't forget. Not anything that matters." Samantha stepped beside him. "Neither do you." Ethan didn't reply. He just watched as Ash and the boy sat side by side in the soft grass. Later that day, Ethan brought out a group of veterans for their weekly canine therapy session. Most were former law enforcement, all recovering from physical or emotional trauma. One of them, Paul Maddox, a burly black man in his 60s with a prosthetic foot and faded tribal tattoos on both arms, had once been a riot control officer in New York. Now he found peace teaching young dogs to track lost items. He knelt next to one shepherd pup, scratched its ears, then looked up at Ethan. "You know," he said, voice gravelly, "this place, this idea, it's not just saving dogs. It's saving people." Ethan gave a small smile. "I think that's what Blaze intended." Paul nodded, then whistled to the pup. "Well, tell him thanks for me." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the garden lanterns flickered to life, Ethan returned to the pine tree. Ash lay there as always, eyes half closed, tail thudding softly as Ethan approached. Ethan sat beside him, his knees creaking, his hands holding a folded piece of paper. "I found this," he said aloud, "in my old field notebook. It's from the night we brought you both home." He cleared his throat. Day 1. 2 pups rescued from the fire line, one brave, one broken, but both alive. I don't know what to name them yet. Maybe something that fits what they've been through. Fire and ash. Blaze and ash. Let's see if anything good can grow from that ash licked Ethan's hand. Somewhere behind them, Lucas laughed as one of the pups chased its tail. The seed had taken root. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't come in flashes of lightning or thunderous voices from the sky. Sometimes, they walk on 4 legs, through fire, through snow, and straight into our broken hearts. Blaze didn't speak. He didn't need to. His loyalty was louder than any sermon, and his sacrifice was more powerful than 1,000 prayers. He gave everything so others could live. He chose love over fear, devotion over survival. And in doing so, he reminded us of something holy, that God still moves in this world sometimes through the hearts of animals, through quiet acts of courage, through bonds forged in pain. And Ash, he stayed behind. He didn't just survive, he carried the memory. He taught others. He led the next generation, like a disciple keeping the faith alive. This story isn't just about dogs, it's about hope, about second chances, about rising from ashes when the world thinks you're done. And maybe, just maybe, it's about the way God sends help when we least expect it, wrapped not in robes but in fur. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that love still exists, that bravery isn't always loud, and that miracles still walk among us, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this video, comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and if you believe Blaze is watching over us from somewhere higher, type Amen in the comments. Let's fill this space with gratitude for the heroes we meet and for the God who sends them. May He bless and protect every soul who hears this story tonight. Subscribe if you believe in second chances, and never stop believing in love, no matter where it comes from.